Hello, everyone. Good to see you.
Hello.
Be here with you. So welcome. And we're going to just, hi, Garrett, popping on there. You're muted, Will.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Here you are.
Good to see you all.
Hope your day has been going well. It's so nice in the Pacific Northwest right now. Louise, how is it on your end of the world? Aren't you on the East Coast? You're muted.
Hi. It was one of the nicest we've had, but we had a thunderstorm in the late afternoon that made everything back to muggy again. So we had a few nice hours, but it's been very hot and humid most of the time, and a bad thunderstorm just about every day.
Okay, remind me where you are.
Washington, D.C., Bethesda,
Okay,
Maryland.
yeah, that's right, DC, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A good place to get very warm and muggy.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
Have a lot of family down there.
Yeah.
Oh, where are you?
Oh, Vancouver.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah, you're the people who can stay for the whole program, and I'd have to bail at 10 o'clock our time. Yeah,
right.
you're in the
Bless
right.
your heart.
correct
Bless your
time zone.
heart for hanging in there.
Oh, I think the last week was so terrific. I went and listened to it. I watched it again on the YouTube. I'm really glad you put that up there.
That's great.
Well,
Yeah.
that was the work of Garrett.
Okay, thank you, Garrett.
And we have Lynn calling in from India, and I think it's about 5:30, no, 6:30 in the morning there.
Oh,
Lynn.
wow.
Good morning.
Oh,
Good morning,
how
man.
cute.
That's wonderful to welcome you and at this early morning hour. Thank you for joining us.
Mm.
So why don't we take a few moments, everyone? We're getting more people joining us as we wait a few more minutes. So while we wait, let's put that to good use beyond talk of weather, although it's nice to check in a bit, and come into a few minutes of just meditation, silencing the outer realm and coming into the inner and just being in some stillness together. So I invite you to close your eyes or have a soft gaze away from the keyboard, away from your device, and come into a place of awareness of your breath, awareness of this space that you're in, sitting in, and into your body, giving appreciation for this body that carries us everywhere we go. We'll just sit for maybe about 10 minutes. And so I really encourage you to come into that quiet place within yourself. And if your mind wanders, just bring it back to the breath or back to your sacred word or whatever your practice is, into your heart center. And I'll ring the bell at the end of our time. Welcome again, everyone. Tonight, we're going to have a little bit of a talk for maybe 30 or 40 minutes. And then we're going to move into some engagement, both with yourself, but also then in some small groups to connect more and to learn a little bit more about each other. So, and then we'll have some time together in the full group at the end. That's the plan. We'll see how it all unfolds. That's our plan. We'll see what she has in store. So for now, yeah, just sit back and open your hearts to what is yet to come, and we'll guide you through the evening together.
So welcome again, everyone. Welcome, Ariel. Nice to see you here. And I think you're the main new face this week. Briefly, no, I think Terry's new this week also. Were you there last week?
Terry was here.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, so in this course, we're basically exploring different manifestations of the divine feminine across the major world religions, looking at the theology and the representation of the feminine aspects of the divine, looking at the mystical dimensions, then also doing some simple practices that we'll be doing. We'll be doing some of that this tonight. And also then looking at what are the universal aspects of the feminine dimension of the divine, which in my view are quite profoundly, inspiringly homeomorphic is the technical term in interspirituality, sort of the interfaith discourse, which is basically that there are these aspects of the feminine side of God that are found universally across the traditions. And although the theologies are different, the names, of course, are very different, and even the conceptualization of the function of the divine feminine or the divine mother are different. There are these very deep universal dimensions in common across the traditions, as well as these quite hidden esoteric aspects of the feminine side of God. So we're going to be exploring all of those different dimensions. This evening, I want to begin, and by the way, so that means, we'll be looking at traditions East and West, and then the relationships between the two, and some of the different theologies and how they relate to one another, as well as the practices. So this evening, I'm going to begin with my own background a little bit, and in a certain sense, my own initiation into this whole arena came through, I would say, well, it definitely came primarily through the Hindu tradition, both in the form of the reading and being fascinated and really drawn to some of the Hindu manifestations, and Buddhist as well, Hindu and Buddhist manifestations of the divine feminine. And then also by my teacher, who I'll say a little bit about this evening, who came into my life in the classic way that is spoken of: when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and essentially brought a transmission, very powerful transmission that has basically transformed my life completely from within. And certain aspects of what she brought are something that I now recognize as distinctly belonging to the feminine side of the divine. So I'd like to start with doing a little screen share and going to let's see, I think that's not it. Here we go. Let me come to our, so here we are. This is just trying to get my slides in order here. Okay, so this is just the kind of overview title slide. And then as we saw last week, these are some of the images. I'm just sort of revisiting them briefly, just to kind of have a visual gestalt on the different ways that the divine feminine is represented across the traditions. Sorry, I'm still a little slow on the draw here. So that's the Blessed Virgin and Kuan Yin. And then we've gone through the objectives. I meant to. Okay, so here is where I wanted to start this evening. Let me make sure I've got the right, sorry, I've got to make sure I've got the right file here. Yeah, I do. Okay, here we go. So this is where I wanted to begin with the whole understanding of the Divine Mother. Now, this comes specifically from Sri Aurobindo. These next several points that I want to outline, and I will sort of go through them. This is kind of where I began with my own understanding, and reading this and grappling with this whole aspect of the feminine side of God, which, as you know, for those of us who are raised in the West and in the Western tradition, even acknowledging that there's a feminine side to God takes a kind of change of mind, because we are so conditioned by the patriarchal, by the male masculine icons and conceptualizations of God, that it takes a kind of an awakening to even come to embrace this whole understanding of God as feminine, or having a feminine aspect. So in any case, my opening to that came through, as I said, the Hindu tradition, and in particular through the writings of Sri Aurobindo, who was a very strong devotee of the Divine Mother. And so one of the qualities that he speaks to is that the Divine Mother is the ultimate mediator, essentially between the different levels of divinity, between what we could call the absolute Godhead, the utterly ineffable essence beyond all concepts and beyond the concept of the beyond, and then this plane of manifest, living reality here in the cosmos and here on earth. And so the understanding is that she alone harbors the absolute power and the ineffable presence, which is perhaps what is called the Holy Spirit, or as we will see later, there's also the Holy Shekhinah, which is the Jewish mystical understanding of the divine feminine, or one aspect of it, as we will be exploring later when we look at the Kabbalah. There's also the Bina, which is the higher plane of the Shekinah. So there's different levels of the Divine Mother, and she functions on these different levels as this mediator, because she is the source, the mother of all that exists. Anything that exists is born through her womb. So all that exists in the manifest plane, the entire cosmos, as well as the subtle levels of awareness and consciousness, are in some sense birthed through her. And so she then harbors this absolute power and ineffable presence, and contains or calls the truth that have to be manifested, and brings them down, brings them into manifestation, into form, into different levels of sorry. Oh, okay. Garrett was just letting me know that my slides are not showing. So That's okay. I'll get them on in a moment. So just to finish what I was saying here. So she basically brings things down from the higher planes into all the different levels of manifestation, right down here to the concrete earth. And so she basically reveals what was hidden. And this is what Aurobindo speaks of. I'm going to now go to the slideshow and see if this comes forward. Except that I think I have to hit share screen. Excuse me here. Give me 1 second. Share screen. And here we go. I think this is it. Now I think you can see this. So here is this statement that I was speaking to. This is from Aurobindo. So she harbors this power. She brings things down from the mystery in which they were hidden into the light of her infinite consciousness and gives them a form of force in her omnipotent power and boundless life and a body in the universe. So it is this manifesting power that the Divine Mother brings, which is really a mystical power that transforms spirit into matter. This is really important. And sometimes I think we take it for granted, but we should never take this for granted. I mean, and in fact, every female, every woman and every female of the species has the power, embodies the power to actually incarnate spirit into flesh through her form. So actually can bring spirit into a walking, living being on this earth. So it's a very profound quality, an inherent spiritual manifesting power of the feminine, which is carried by every feminine being in a certain sense, in a fractal way, and is also then carried here, as Aurobindo speaks to, in terms of all of manifestation. And then, so we have this, and so then all existence is her play with the Supreme. It is this interaction between the different levels. Everything is her manifestation of the mysteries of the eternal, the miracles of the infinite. Now you can hear in this, Aurobindo has a certain tendency to write in superlatives because he had a very profound awakening to the Divine Mother and a very deep interconnection with her, and also with Sweet Mother, his spiritual consort, with whom he practiced this communion of masculine and feminine on a very deep level. And so he's really writing about this depth of realization that he's had. And he writes in these superlatives because he's trying to convey something of the supreme majesty and glory of all of this, in simple conceptual language, which is, first of all, of course, impossible. But he does it with enough precision and writing from a depth of experience that I think the insights that come through are very, very compelling. And I found them very helpful over the years as I have continued to embrace the divine feminine within my own experience and in the work that we do. And so, and this idea, the way I understand this idea of all existence is her play with the Supreme, is that she is the manifesting power in the cosmos. And so everything that happens, everything that we see, everything that comes into being comes in through her and by her command and under her authority, if you will. And she does this as a form of sacrifice. And this is a point that he makes that I think are really important. That all the scenes of the earth play, everything that happens, for example, here on this plane, have been like a drama arranged and planned and staged by her. With the cosmic gods as her assistants and herself as a veiled actor. So she is basically veiled, but comes into this plane of existence. And sometimes you meet someone who you feel has this presence that is just emanating so strongly, and you feel that pulsating power and grace coming through this person who is like the veiled actor, if you will. I'm thinking of like Sister Lucy Currian, who's someone who is such a profound embodiment of the divine feminine in an incredibly powerful way, that when you are in her presence and when you see what she's doing in the world, you feel like you're with this cosmic divine mother in a way, even though she's a very grounded human being, just like us, and invites anyone to join her. And my teacher was similar. My teacher has a very remarkable presence that when you're in the presence of that, you want to be nowhere else. You simply are drawn there because you feel this deep nurturing down to the cellular level. That was my experience. And in her deep, back to Aurobindo, in her deep and great love for her children, she's consented to put on herself the cloak of this obscurity, condescended to bear the attacks and torturing influences of the powers of the darkness and the falsehood, and is born to pass through the portals of the birth that is a death. She has taken upon herself the pangs and sorrows of creation, since it seemed that thus alone could it be lifted to the light and joy and truth and eternal life. This is the great sacrifice, the Holocaust of Prakriti, the sacrifice of the Divine Mother. Now, Prakriti is the term in Hinduism, in sort of Hindu cosmology, for the manifest aspect of the cosmos, as opposed to Purusha, which is the unmanifest. That's speaking very kind of simplistically. There's several different levels of Purushas, and perishable and imperishable, and then the ultimate Purusha. But bottom line is that Prakriti is kind of the manifest side of the universe. And she has basically taken it upon herself to sacrifice herself to come into this realm and to engage the forces of darkness and challenge in order to, in effect, spiritualize, to call to the highest the entirety of creation, to come into a kind of divine alignment and worship, if you will. What we're speaking about is something that I don't claim to fully understand. It's a deep mystery. And, you know, in reading some of the greats like Aurobindo and others about it, I feel like there's a depth of experience that they have had. And at the same time, they too are grasping for words, because what we're talking about are ultimates that are beyond what can be understood in words. And I think we all know that. But what is so important about what he's saying here, back to, is this sacrifice is basically, she takes on the suffering of the world and embraces it. In some ways, the same way a mother takes on all of the challenges of the pain of birth, and then all of the difficulties of raising the child, because there's some larger purpose through it all that, unless she does that, would be lost. And so there is a profound self-giving at a very deep level. And this is something that I think is very important for us to remember, that the Divine Mother, the Divine Feminine, gives, and goes through incredible suffering in certain ways in order to bring forth and to pour forth what she brings forth. So this should never be taken for granted, this aspect of what the Divine Mother brings, what she is giving and giving up in order to do this work. And then Aurobindo speaks of 4 personalities of the Divine Mother, 4 different aspects. And this is, of course, just one particular formulation. I mean, there's different ways that this could be spoken of, and in different traditions, one would find perhaps certain different ways of articulating it, but I think all of these qualities would be found there. So the first one is this Maheshwari. Her personality, as he describes it, of calm wideness and comprehending wisdom and tranquil benignity and inexhaustible compassion. I mean, here again, you can see these superlatives, and sovereign and surpassing majesty and all-ruling greatness. And if you think about your experience of the wisest female mother line personage that you've known, you can feel each of these qualities. There's a certain way in which the feminine brings in this vastness of wisdom and this tranquility and benevolence and this incredible compassion, you know, that she is able to embrace all manner of failings and insults and challenges. Doesn't mean that she just goes along with them. I'm not saying that, but there's a way in which she suffers through that. She takes all of that and bears with it in a kind of surpassing majesty and greatness, all in order to steward and to bring new life and to elevate and lift up her children, which is all of creation, into its fullest and most exalted expression and manifestation. And then there's the Mahakali aspect, her power of incredible strength and irresistible passion, her warrior mood. And this is no joke, as you know, or as you do know if you've encountered this aspect of the Divine Mother, where it is a kind of a ruthless quality for truth and justice and what is right. And she will stop at nothing to bring forth what is demanded and what is required. And so the force of her will and her impetuous swiftness and world-shaking force, this is something that I personally have had some experience of in my own personal journey. There were times working with my teacher where some kind of aspect of my own ego or my own smugness or arrogance or some quality of impurity or self-importance, whatever it might be. And she would get a look in her eye and I knew something was coming, and I knew it wasn't her, but it was something coming through her that was being transmitted directly to me. And and when I experienced these things, I was literally trembling because the power and force that came through her, she called it bloodless surgery. Sometimes there was this thundering, and it was basically a force of power that was cutting through my own armored resistance and my own defenses to prop myself up as the person that I was identifying as. And when there was some kind of self-importance or some kind of arrogance, and I'm not saying those things are gone completely, no, don't get me wrong, but I had a lot of it. And she was working this and worked me over in a way that I can only say I've never experienced anything like that before or since. And I feel very clear that she was sent to me to do this work in order that I could be doing the work that we are now doing and have been doing for 25 years. So this is all about 25 years ago. But she used to say to me, your work is absolutely nothing and it's not your work. And I would say, you know, I founded the work. I'm the whole inventor of it, kind of thing. Even when I didn't say that, that was my attitude. My attitude was, of course it's my work. This is what I'm doing. And I've chosen to give my life to this. And she would just thunder and rail against that and flatten me. It was very powerful. And it was like a thunderstorm coming in to the room. And I felt, part of me was just in awe. And part of me was kind of terrified. And part of me was totally inspired because I saw the truth of my own ignorance, that she was basically like with a laser beam shattering and not tolerating, and basically calling me to something larger. And she used to say, your work is not your work. It does not belong to you. And don't you ever claim it as yours. That work belongs to God alone, she would say. And she said, and if you mess it up, if you make a mistake, you will be thrown out completely, and God will find another instrument, because there's no room for imperfection in divine work. Humans can have their failings and they make mistakes, that's okay. But if you're going to harbor any degree of attachment or falsehood in this mission, forget it. You'll be removed and you'll be replaced, because you don't matter. What matters is this is divine work. It's not your work. And she drilled that into me. And that sense of this incredible power and force. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. It's hard to talk about, and I don't often talk about these things, but I want to share something about, I think it's important to share something about my personal experience of these things, so that you have a sense of how I've experienced this. I think there's lots of ways that the Divine Mother has experienced. And so I'm not saying it's the only way, but I also want to say that when I read in Aurobindo about this world-shaking force and power, I know that I've experienced at least some of that in a very dramatic way. I've also seen it at times with Sister Lucy Kurian, for example, in India, when there are threats to her organization or to the integrity of her work. And to see her stand in her truth and place her entire being on the line and stand for what is true against incredible odds at times. It's something to witness. It is so empowering and inspiring and awesome. So anyway, so continuing here with the 4 personalities, the next one is Mahalakshmi. Mahalakshmi is this, well, vivid and sweet and wonderful, with her deep secret of beauty and harmony and fine rhythm, her intricate and subtle opulence, her compelling attraction and captivating grace. So this is the aspect of what we would think of as that irresistible divine beauty of the Divine Mother, of the Divine Feminine. And as Aurobindo says elsewhere, when this aspect of the Divine Mother is experienced, everyone melts and falls at her feet. That quality of divinity, that quality of a mother's love, when she just pours herself out, this is just one manifestation of, and the child runs to her, and the mother is just there embracing, and it's just radiating out. And that child just goes and melts. That at some level, our soul does the same thing. When this aspect of Mahalakshmi is revealed, when this aspect of the Divine Mother comes, there's not a single creature in the cosmos that cannot simply melt and be drawn. And so I love the way Aurobindo describes it, that captivating beauty and grace and incredible sense of harmony. So in that regard, I had an experience that some long time ago, this is before I met my teacher, and I was meditating for a period of several months with a very strong intention to try to come to understand the nature of the Divine Feminine. And there was a period of a couple of weeks or 3 weeks where I just had this burning yearning literally, to understand what is this that I am so compelled and drawn to. That was the question that was burning in me. And it had to do with the feminine. It had to do with the nature of the feminine, not just women, not just the beauty of nature, but what is it that's behind it all? That was my deep question. And it was a question that more lived in my heart and was burning in my heart. It was not an intellectual question. And I had this meditation where it was coming up in my meditation. I had a whole series of meditations at that point, which maybe I'll speak to at some point later. Some very remarkable journeys of going inside the Divine Mother and having journeys of the feminine internally, quite mystical. And at the time I thought, this is great. And I'm really being shown something very unique and remarkable. And when I was, there's no doubt about it. But I assumed at that point in my naivete that would all be something that I would live with and live as in my life for the rest of my life. And that's not what happened. It was a period of my life that was kind of this incredible illumination. And then it was sort of withdrawn. And now it's a memory that I can access by going to my journals. But it was a kind of an opening that has now stayed with me as a reverberation, but not as vivid. I think it's probably a good thing because it was so powerful. It was all consuming, and I kind of couldn't do anything else for those months, but be compelled to be kind of grappling with this. And this was like that. It wasn't in that period, but it was probably a couple years later. And I had this period of really deep yearning for what is the essence of the Divine Mother. And in my meditation one day, and in particular, what is it that I'm so drawn to? There was something hidden that I wanted to understand, that I wanted to know. I couldn't name it, but I could feel it. And I could feel it burning in me. And one day, sitting on my cushion with that intense yearning, which I had been carrying for like a couple of weeks with no answer, but the question had just been intensifying in my heart. And one day, sitting on the cushion, I was there, and suddenly there was in my field of view, which is normally when I sit in meditation, there's kind of a black gray screen because I close my eyes and I don't see anything. And suddenly that was split open, and there stepped into view, so this is in my internal vision, that sort of blackness in front of me suddenly was parted like the veils were torn open. And into my field of vision, in my inner field of vision, there appeared a deity that was a shimmering green, luminous being, which I had never seen anything like. And I didn't have any idea. It stopped all of my thinking in its tracks. It was utterly spellbinding and dumbfounding. And I immediately knew, because of the intensity and the incredibly intense radiating energy and essence, that this was an answer to this question that I'd been carrying for these weeks of the Divine Mother, some kind of manifestation of the Divine Feminine. And it was absolutely so beautiful that it penetrated every pore of my being. It was literally like a showering of this incredibly intense, beautiful, divine feminine energy from this radiant, green, luminous deity. And it was so instant that the only thing I could do in that moment was to bow. And I folded over into a deep bow. And as I bowed, there was this irony, because I wanted nothing more than to keep looking, because this was such a privilege to be seeing something I'd never seen, a beauty and an intensity and clarity of that beauty that I had never seen. And at the same time, it was so exalted, there was nothing I could do but bow, which meant that I bowed and I couldn't see anymore. As I bowed, I did bow, and then that light came streaming, and I was seeing the light streaming from the lower part of her body and her feet. And I was still bathing in the light, but I couldn't see it anymore. But I did have this vision, and it penetrated my being. And I've never forgotten it. In some ways, it stayed with me. I mean, there was some kind of imprint. And a few years after that, probably about 10 years after that, I was able to share this with Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo, who some of you may know is a Tibetan Buddhist nun in India. And she basically confirmed with me that this was a vision of Green Tara, of what the deity they call Green Tara. And Tara is one of the manifestations of the Divine Mother in Buddhism. And to her, it was like, yeah, that's Green Tara. And she has a very intimate, personal relationship with a number of these deities. She used to say, when she lived in her cave for 12 years, meditating 12 hours a day, that she really looked forward to October and November, when finally everyone would leave her alone and she could look forward to 6 months of total solitude. Because then, once everybody left, then the deities would move in with her and she would live with them. And so she and the deities would live there together for 6 months, undisturbed by anyone else. I love that sort of story. So I think she does have a very strong relationship with these different dimensions of spiritual consciousness and strong connection to the Divine Mother. If you ever happened to be so lucky as to visit her nunnery, and the whole thing is a Tibetan temple, but every single image of the Buddha is feminine throughout the entire temple. It's very profound. Because she says these are nuns and they should see God in the form of a female. So anyway, that's another whole story. We may tell more about that later. But in any case, that was beautiful. So this was just an example of one aspect of what I would say is one aspect of the Mahalakshmi aspect. Something so extraordinary. So I am going to, I think, leave it there for tonight. Well, let's see, do I have one more? Because I don't want to take all the time. Yeah, I think I'm going to close here. Let's just touch on the last one, Mahasaraswati. I'll just read it, and then next time I'll tell a couple stories that I wanted to tell about this, including about our little granddaughter, who's a little Saraswati in her own way. But Maharsata Saraswati, and this is the aspect of the Divine Mother, of her capacity of intimate knowledge and careful, flawless work, and quiet and exact perfection in all things. Wisdom, strength, harmony, perfection are their several attributes. And I'll just say that I've seen this aspect so beautifully manifest in our little granddaughter, and in different ways in my life, and also with Cynthia. I mean, and just to share on a personal level, as I have experienced Cynthia, I can see how Cynthia ignores certain things because they don't matter. Cynthia knows what to ignore and what to pay attention to. But when Cynthia takes something on that's really important, all of this care and precision and high standards come into play. I don't know if I'm embarrassing you, Cynthia, but it's so beautiful to witness. And it's this quality of the Mahasaraswati, of that careful, flawless accuracy and determination that it's all got to be correct and just right, because it's sacred and it is the nature of the Divine Mother's work to be precise and exact and balanced and orderly in a beautiful presentation and manifestation with fine attention to detail. So that's a brief summary of those qualities. I'll have more stories to tell next week. Thank you for listening. And let me just give a caveat here. I'm not pronouncing the nature of the Divine Mother. I make no pretenses to claim that I know how it is, or that I've had anything close to the revelation that, you know, Sri Aurobindo or Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo or other, what I consider to be true masters of this tradition. I've had my experience and I am her devotee, and I see the absolute importance of bringing an awakening to the feminine dimension of the divine at every level across the religions, including the ones that the Eastern religions that, although they honor her in the spiritual plane, the reality on the ground, as we know, in Asia and India and China is horrific when it comes to the divine daughters walking the earth. So I don't begin to deny all of those things, nor do I begin to claim myself as an expert, but I do passionately love the divine feminine, and I am her devotee, and I share this in my enthusiasm and my ecstatic devotion and humility about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. So in a moment, we're going to move into an activity. Hopefully you got a message, an email from Garrett inviting you to bring a paper and crayons or markers or whatever, a pen. If you don't have that, then in a moment you can go and fetch those things. Don't worry about it right now. I'm just going to share a couple things because what we'd like to invite, you're going to have a few minutes, probably about 10 minutes, to just what we would call a river of your spiritual journey. And so, and you can think about it as a river because it goes in all directions, weaves in and out of your life or through your life. And so, what we'd like you to focus on there is some of the pivotal moments that you have had in your life, like Will has pointed out in his journey. And in particular, if you're able to find those moments when the divine feminine has been present for you. And I say if you're able, because if you grew up in the West, as I did, even though I grew up with atheist parents who rejected pretty much everything except the Eastern traditions, the imprint in my mind and in my experience was all about a male God. And so it's taken a lot of time in my adult life to shed that image. And it's through my meditation practice that I've been able to do that, and somewhat with languaging. I'm not too hung up on the language of he, but just if it gets too heavy, then it can become too much. But that isn't where I get stuck, but it would be in this image, because all the images of God have been fed to me throughout my life as being masculine, as being male. And so trying to find those feminine qualities might be difficult. So as you go and you can draw or you can write or whatever feels right to you, and this is just for you. And after this, we will be moving into some groups for some sharing, but you can, but you don't have to show what you put on paper. This is just your process. But as you do that, just to think about what those moments have been. So I'm going to share before we go into that. This is my first book I ever wrote. It's my no-name book by Cindy Bricks. I wrote that at 11 years old, and I just want you to know, for those of you that know our gender work, this is the picture I drew. Can you see? The man and the woman. So even back then I was doing gender work or thinking about it. I was also struggling. Like I said, I had atheist parents, but I was struggling with what is this God? What is this whole concept of life and death? And I found my book the other day. So I want to read this poem to you that I wrote at 11 years old. It's called To Her. I think of her as blue as the roaring sea, and as black as a black cloud can be. I think of her as green as the grass grows in the spring, and as colorful as the leaves can be. I think she is a very beautiful tree. So as you move into this time of reflection, let yourself open to all the ways that you may have experienced the divine feminine and how that's come through from the moment of your birth all the way up till now. And you might just put down on your paper 2, 3, 4, or 5 particular moments that speak to you. And then we'll come together in groups to share a little bit. And it's okay if you don't have any. Put down the ways that God, the divine, has come to you, because maybe there isn't a distinction. Maybe it just all just is, and that's fine too. So if you have paper, then we're going to put some soft music on, and you can just kind of go into a reflective time. If you need to get some paper and a pen or markers or crayons, then go ahead and do that now. And we'll give at 8 minutes, we'll see how you're doing. So bringing your time of journaling or drawing to a close for now. And this is for you, so you can always come back to it later. We're going to gently move into some small groups. And you'll each have about 8 minutes each to share. It might sound like a long time, but I think it will go very quickly. So you probably only have time to share maybe one story or maybe two. And please be mindful of the time. Garrett will put in the window time markers saying first person, second person, and that way everyone will have the same amount of time. So maybe you might even designate, or someone can take that responsibility to make sure that you stay on time so everyone gets some airtime together. And share what feels right to you in this group. Some things are very intimate and it may not be the right time. So really be mindful of what feels right. And at the same time, we invite you to go into areas maybe you haven't, if it feels comfortable and safe to do that. So we will come back together in the full group at the very end of our time. Anything else? Will, do you have anything? Or Garrett, do you have anything?
Just to say that each one of us has our own particular unique experience of the divine, of God, of the Divine Mother. And so, just encouraging you to really trust your experience and bring forth what it's been in your life. And so our sharings are simply a way of priming the pump and inviting forward your own experiences, because this is part of life and we've all had these experiences come in different ways in our lives. So, yeah. So enjoy this interlude with the others in your group, and then we'll reconvene afterwards.
Okay. So we've just opened the rooms here. Will, we're gonna go ahead and close off the YouTube Live for now, since people are in their small groups.
So thank you everyone who has been watching from YouTube. It's wonderful to have you join us. Blessings.
Cynthia is muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. Here we go. If you've done your own drawing then or journaling, then we just invite you to hold that in your heart and maybe share with someone who you're close with, and you can bring that forward in that way. Thank you for being with us.